Welcome to this episode of Against the Mountains of Madness. I'm your host, Jason.
And I'm John C. Wright.
And this time we thought we'd talk about where's my jetpack? What was the future that was predicted? And where did it go? Why didn't we ever get it? And what did we get instead?
And
So-
might we get it even so?
Might we get it in the end? Yes.
Might we get it in the end? Wait, that sounds terrible. I'm not sure I want to get it in the end.
All of us grew up watching Star Trek, but that future seems further off than ever. But, or Buck Rogers, or many other television series, and read many a science fiction story, and they all predicted futures that seem not to have come to pass yet. Although perhaps, well, I suppose in the 40s they were quite optimistic and would expect us to be to other star systems by now. So,
or at least to other planets, depending on how realistic the story was.
Well, yes, that's true.
So. And those stories were written when the moonshot was hypothetical, was something that Jules Verne or Isaac Newton made up. You see,
this is true.
A lot of the stories I read when I was young, half of them were written before Yuri Gagarin orbited the Earth. So even the idea that it was possible was regarded with skepticism.
An open question.
Right. So let's just go down the list of the things we were promised that we didn't get. First off is flying cars. Now, do you want a flying car? Because there are people working on it. There's people. I just saw someone working on a drone with four big rigs, four big rotors, front, back, port, and starboard. Which once he takes up into the air and flies off to his party and gets drunk and crashes into his second story window, would revolutionize air travel.
I think that's probably a flying car is a nice idea, but I saw a great skit many years ago that illustrated what I would see as the principal concern. They just invented the personal jetpack for everybody. And then the whole skit was an interviewer and an interviewee, and he's asking him about the jetpack, and he's going, yeah, and it's cheap and everyone will be able to fly around. And in the background, there's like people flying around and crashing into things and exploding and this sort of stuff. And then he goes, I'm going to kill a lot of people, aren't I? Oh my God.
Now, here's the thing about the main objection to flying cars is that drunks would crash them into second-story windows.
Yeah.
Right? But the number of helicopter crashes we have is relatively low. Despite the disasters that have been in the newspapers recently, if you look at it statistically, you're much more likely to get into a car accident than a plane accident. But you're much more likely to survive a car accident than a plane accident, because if you get in a plane accident, you're going to fall 20,000 feet.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's like skydiving. Skydiving doesn't have a lot of accidents, but the accidents they do have tend not to be recoverable.
Yes.
So,
yes. So, do we have flying cars? It's just that they look like helicopters, because helicopters can take off and land on tall public buildings. And,
that's true.
And rich men can use them like a chauffeur system. But we don't have the line of flying cars. We don't have the Jetsons. We don't have the Coruscant scenes from Star Wars, with air traffic in huge streams. Or the Fifth Element. Yeah, we don't have the Fifth Element.
It occurs to me, you know what it is? You know what the promise of a flying car is, and you know why a helicopter isn't it?
What is it?
I have a driver's license. Mm-hmm. I can get in my car and I can go wherever I like.
Mm-hmm.
I can drive there. I just have to fill the car up and it's fine. Nobody cares.
Right.
And any semi-literate boob can get a driver's license and safely operate a car. Reasonably safely operate a car, as long as they don't get intoxicated and stuff, as long as they pay attention. Like it's not particularly difficult to operate a car safely. Right. That's not true of a helicopter. You need lots of training and lots of practice and experience. You need a chauffeur service basically to have flying cars. That's the difference.
Well, let me introduce the second thing we were promised, which is personal robot servants. If a flying car required you to have a robot chauffeur because humans are just not well trained enough to use those things, we all know the robots could make no mistakes whatsoever, right? And they would talk, and they would talk in slight funny English accents, like the guy, like C-3PO on Star Wars. Now, we do have really creepy and horrifying robots being put out right now by Elon Musk. Maybe everyone else but me seems to think these are the wonder workers of the future that are going to put all the dock workers out of business. And while people like me are laughing at the dock workers going out of business, the dock workers are laughing at me because AI is going to put the science fiction writers out of business because they're going to be able to write in 5 minutes what it takes me 5 months to write.
No.
But could you solve the flying car problem if you just had safety systems run by Skynet? Because Skynet will never turn on us.
You could solve the flying. Do you remember the movie Minority Report?
Yes, indeed, I do.
I enjoyed that. But they solved the dangerous car problem by basically having public transport everywhere with little personal pods that you get in and out of. But
they're controlled centrally by a central computer.
That would be one way to solve the problem. But that's
well, what about the other problem?
Horrifying. So
what about the other problem, which is power source?
Always a problem.
Do we have a energy source good enough to hoist a flying car aloft? If you do it with a helicopter blade, it's too noisy for use in a suburban setting. I mean, people go deaf unless they're wearing ear protection if they're in a heliport. You know, in the Jetsons, they flip a switch and the anti-gravity field comes on and it goes.
What
but no one has discovered anti-gravity yet.
No. I don't know. What if you See, I don't know enough about how noise cancellation. I mean, I understand the principle of noise cancellation, which is, you've got a sound wave and then you just have an opposite sound wave over the top of it. The two cancel each other out. But I don't know if, because, sound waves are just like air moving effectively.
They're concussion waves in the air. Yeah.
Yeah. If you cancel them out, is there still, like, you can't hear it, there's no noise, it's silent, but is there still no wave? Is the air still being displaced? I don't know.
That was my question. My question is...
No, I was just wondering. Sorry, they're saying they're too noisy.
For a jetpack, let's not say a flying car, let's say a jetpack. If I want to put on my jetpack and fly to another city, what's my fuel source? Because the rocket equation governs fuel weight versus fuel output. And the rocket equation is the most unhappy equation in science fiction because it puts grave limits on what we can hoist aloft using rocket power.
Yeah, and you have to drag your fuel with you.
If a jetpack was lighter than air, if it was anti-gravity, or if you strapped a blimp to your back, you wouldn't have that problem. But if you strap a blimp to your back, then that's steampunk. That's not science fiction, so we can't talk about that in this episode.
Well, but I mean that's one way to solve the problem. Then you just need a motor. Then you just need like a big fan blade to push you around. You can do that at the moment with a parachute and
well, we've had jetpacks. We've actually had jetpacks since the 60s. In the movie Goldfinger, James Bond puts on a real working jetpack and flies. And in the TV show Lost in Space, in the
30 seconds. You get about 30 seconds.
You get about 30 seconds because of the rocket equation. Yeah. But if you had a Mr. Fusion engine like they do in Back to the Future 2,
that's true.
If you had a small something the size of a teacup, coffee cup, that was atomic. Atomic power is one of the most lightweight per erg produced energy sources available to mankind. When we one day get matter-antimatter energy, that will be the most lightweight possible under our present understanding of physics. We don't have that yet. But you could take a chunk of uranium and heat up water, easy peasy, in something the size of a suitcase.
Oh, I agree, but probably not be able to strap it to your back and avoid really horrible cancer.
Yeah, that's the problem, because the lead shielding would then be prohibitive.
The shielding is the problem.
I think we need either cold fusion, which is right now is make-believe, or some other fusion system. And we thought we were going to have that by now, and we don't.
Did Nikola Tesla successfully invent wireless power?
I used to think he did not, but now I believe he did, because everything else that Alex Jones has said turned out to be right. Now, if
Yeah.
you had broadcast power, that means you could put an atomic pile at the North Pole where it's not going to hurt anyone except for Santa Claus and Superman, because Superman's not going to be hurt by it. And I hope you get that. I hope you understand what that joke meant. And just broadcast it everywhere. You know. In fact, I read a science fiction story called Sleepwalker's World by Philip K. Dick about how the broadcast power operates, but the side effect was that it stimulated the sleep center of everyone's brain. So it would work, but it knocked everyone out, and then criminals who were immune to the effect would just commit crimes during the blackouts. So, and there was an evil conspiracy, and so on and so forth. It's actually kind of a great book.
Okay.
So broadcast power we were promised back in the 30s, and we never got it.
No, we never.
So we could still get jetpacks and flying cars if we got a light energy source and maybe robot chauffeurs. But are we going to get robot chauffeurs? We seem to be on the brink of it. I've seen a film of Elon Musk's creepy-looking humanoid robots that stomp right out of the uncanny valley, and also dog things that work for the military that are even creepier.
We have self-driving. We have
self-driving vehicles.
Well, we have self-driving cars at this point. There's most of the problems with them at this point are regulatory issues and things like that. Like when the self-driving car runs someone down, who's liable for that? Yeah. This is the problem they're having with it, as opposed to just, the concept itself. And I would assume self-flying. We have self-flying vehicles at the moment. They're called drones,
right?
And they will. I think
so
they're not completely autonomous, but they're not that far off.
It solves the drunk flying problem. You get into your drone. You push a button. A guy in India lifts up the car for you and manipulates it and flies you to your destination, unless your name is on a list, in which case he flies you directly to the jail.
Well, those are the concerns. Well, so at least on the technology part, like self-flying planes, I think have largely been more or less a reality for a while, except for takeoff and landing. Yeah. Most of the actual flying part is fairly simple to automate. Yeah. It's the not crashing when you land and taking off successfully. There's the tricky parts that you use a human for. Right. But self-flying, I'd be very surprised if they didn't have completely automated drones that can take off and land, do a mission for you at the moment. We'd be close to that if we don't already have that, to the point that you could have one operator command 30 or 40 drones as sort of the commander and just tell them what to do. We'd be,
and keep in mind, AI is every science fiction writer since L. Frank Baum has predicted, the Tin Woodman has predicted, TikTok the Clockwork Man has predicted artificial men, but we've almost always portrayed them as if they were human beings. Now, I myself think that's a limitation of the storyteller's art. If you're telling a story and you have a mechanical man, he's going to be a character and he's going to act like a character. The idea that they would be interlinked into a web, that they wouldn't have a personality, or that they would turn personalities off and on as their different tasks required, is very different from a large language model, which will talk back to you and can pass the Turing test, but it's not like talking to a person.
You can change the personality and do exactly that with them.
Okay. But that's also, I would say that's something science fiction writers did not predict. Now, you could argue with me and say we kind of did predict it, or that we can actually do that now, which we sort of can. I mean, people have AI girlfriends. So you can rent them now.
That's so tragic. Oh, God, that's the saddest thing. That is the saddest thing.
Yep.
And I don't know if that is a bigger indictment on how pathetic some men are, or how awful women have become in many cases.
Well, if I want to leap ahead to a topic I also wanted to cover during this podcast, is there are things that happened in real life, which if I climbed into a time machine and went back to the 1930s and 1940s, and I talked with Hugo Gernsback or I talked with John W. Campbell Jr., and I said, hey, I can tell you what's going to happen in the year 2000. I can tell you what's going to happen in the year 2025. Alice Diglesh of Scribner's, I think it was, would forbid me from talking about the topic, because most of the things that are happening in the world, the major political issues, have to do with the sexual revolution, which in the 1940s was not even in view, except maybe by some intellectuals. And the sexual revolution has led to things that you were not allowed to speak about in public. Certainly not in a science fiction book directed at kids. You see. So there are some of these things that now Helena Loy was a story by Lester Del Rey, which was a story about a guy who had a robot girlfriend. So there were such things. Tanith Lee wrote Silver Metal Lover. That was in Silver Metal Lover. That was one of her better books, and that was in the 70s. But nobody, as far as I know, pointed out the sad fact that you can't make it with a real woman, so you're going to get a sterile robot concubine. No. I take it back again. Star Trek had a show where the love interest of Nurse Chapel, her old boyfriend, brilliant scientist, was replacing everyone with robotic parts, and they even made a robot duplicate of Kirk, and the fembot was dressed. Star Trek was famous for having skimpy costumes. This was the skimpiest costume of all the Star Trek costumes, was for the robot girl. And then, as often happens, Captain Kirk seduced the robot girl. She fell in love with him. Then the evil scientist made a robot duplicate of Captain Kirk. The evil robot duplicate was not in love with the girl, so she killed him. She phasered him to death. So that's what happens when robots fall in love.
Yeah.
Don't date robots. I believe
date
Futurama
robots.
warned us about the dangers of dating robots.
They did.
They did.
Um,
You don't want to hang out with your Marilyn Monroe robot when invaders from Omicron Persei 8 are coming.
This is true, but it's just, that's one of the really sad developments. Actually, the entire pornification of our culture is one of the really tragic
And something I
developments.
could not talk about if I tried to sell a story with my time machine to John W. Campbell Jr.
What would people? It would be fascinating. I wonder if we'll get a strike for this. It would be fascinating to go back to the 1920s and talk to a suffragette and say, "Hey, do you know where all this liberation and freedom for women is going?" They're going to go on the internet. They're going to go on this magic new technology that lets them talk to everybody in the world and sell pictures of their butthole. Instead of having a job. That's what they're going to do.
I don't think that will get you banned. But I will point out that there were writers like G.K. Chesterton and the anti-suffragette writers that nobody has heard about these days. Did you know that more women were against women's suffrage than were for it?
Well, they thought they're going to get drafted and things like that, didn't they? Which finally happened.
Yes, but they also thought it would break up the family.
Well, it did.
Well, yeah. And was it worth
wrong.
it? I mean, I like the mom in Disney's Mary Poppins as much as anyone when she's off there agitating for votes for women. But social changes are things that science fiction writers have trouble predicting, and it's a good thing we have trouble predicting. Here's why: we need to sell our stories to the current audience, to the audience that understands things as they are now. I got in trouble in one of my books just for assuming that in the future, 200 years from now, after a world war and after the United States and England were no longer the dominant economic power in the world, in the globe, that a joint Spanish and Hindu space expedition would have an all-male crew. That was inconceivable to certain members of my readership. They couldn't understand how anyone could even as a hypothetical, propose an all-male crew on a starship. And I said, well, when the ship comes back and there's a baby on board, I want that to be a mystery as to how that happened. But they couldn't even imagine that the culture would change in a way in that direction, you know.
But these are the same people that probably can't conceive that if you were to travel back 60 years in time, you would be thrown in prison for talking about the current political issues of our day. They would be regarded as you'd probably be, if you were to go back 100 years and you were to talk about what life was like in 2025 and describe
it to the people of 1925.
Describe it to people, they would throw you in a loony bin. They wouldn't believe you. They would think you're insane.
Or they might think you were insane and just thought you came from an extremely depraved and decadent culture.
If they
Which would
believed
be,
you, they'd be
if it was
right.
1925 in Germany, I think they would believe you and recognize what was going on, because those guys were pretty decadent in those days. Not as decadent as we are, and they didn't do it in public. They didn't flaunt it.
Hmm.
Which segues into our next episode, our next topic about one thing we were promised was world government. The Federation doesn't govern a world that's broken into different nations.
They're still trying to do it.
Well, now, but it was always the good guys who had world government when I was young. Now the world government to me seems like it's the bad guys. So what changed?
It was always the bad guys. It was always going to be the bad guys. Well, given Fallen Man,
No,
it
that's
should have
not
always
true.
been
In the Lensman series written in the
Sure.
1930s, the world government was benevolent. In the
Sure.
Star Trek Federation, the Federation
Sure.
was a world government. It was benevolent.
I will concede that point, but none of these people understand the fall. Human beings, a world government was always going to be horrendous and evil. Well, the world government was always going to be 1984 or Brave New World, not Star Trek's Federation.
Yep. They thought it was going to be the League of Nations. The dreams of the world government go back to like Kipling's day or even earlier.
Yeah.
You know, and in the Middle Ages, they just thought the world government was already here. They thought it was the Holy Roman Empire. They just thought it hadn't conquered the rest of the world yet.
Hey, look, a world government headed by the Catholic Church would be a mixed bag, but I gotta say, I fear that significantly less than being ruled by the World Economic
ideologue.
Forum.
I don't want to be ruled by an idealist because they don't know when to stop. Idealists don't know when to stop.
No, that's certainly true.
So world government is a prediction. World government by the year 2000 was a prediction that didn't come about, and we're glad for it.
Yeah. Although I think hopefully
we do have a world order. Our someone in the 20s and 30s would not even be able to comprehend how, let's say we just had an election here in America, how that's going to influence everything in Europe, everything in Australia, everything in Asia, like overnight. You know, our president was on the golf course when the chief of state of a foreign nation got into a trade dispute with him. Now, in the 1920s, it would require you to maybe, if you had a transatlantic cable working by telegraph and newspapers, it would take months to hammer that out.
Yeah,
he did it between the
5
fifth,
holes on the golf course or something.
Hole. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say on the world government thing, I think there are still people clearly pushing for controlling everybody and micromanaging everybody because they think they're smarter than everybody else. Hopefully, we'll rise up and. What's the right way to phrase this? They'll take a short drop from a high platform, but we'll leave it at that. But
and you're afraid of getting banned.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a roundabout way of saying it. Anyway, they say wealth.
The way to phrase it, if I may, the way Americans phrase it is the tree of liberty needs to be fed again. Needs to be watered.
But it's been observed with wealth in families. Wealth lasts 3 generations. The first generation makes it. The second generation saw it get made and is able to preserve it because they may not be able to create it, but they know how to keep it going.
They can manage it.
They can manage it. And then the third generation squanders it because they don't understand where it came from or how to manage it.
The Hindus, in their wisdom, have a tripartite god who is a creator, and then one is the preserver, and then one is the destroyer. So, you know.
Well, there you go. So that's an ancient bit of understanding. But I think with our would-be global governors, I think we're we're up to the third generation of them. The first generation were competent, were competent and had a vision and were driven.
The first generation invited the Russians into the UN, which was clearly a mistake from the get-go, and there were people at the time who said so. Churchill among them.
But we are now dealing with their inbred, borderline, retarded grandchildren who don't know how it was created, don't understand it, and are trying to do it, and are just making a hash of it. Hopefully we will survive them making a mess of it and it'll implode, but that gives me hope that...
Now, the other thing about world government is if our AI continues to progress at its current rate, in addition to being able to write science fiction stories and put me out of a job, in addition to being able to fly cars and putting all the chauffeurs out of jobs, uh, Skynet and Colossus will make a deal with the Russians' Guardian system and just create the voice of world control. And we've all seen now that does seem to end badly, as all human freedom is crushed forever. But we avoid an atomic war, so there is that. That's a positive. World government seems to me to be a really bad idea if it's a socialist government, but a perfectly fine idea if it was a European monarchy or if it was an American democracy or something where excuse me, I shouldn't say an American democracy. Let me say a pre-Woodrow Wilson federal system with extremely limited powers. If you had some method
Yep,
of settling disputes internationally without resorting to force, that would be better than otherwise.
that's fair.
But I, of course, being a faithful Catholic, want to see the return of the Holy Roman Emperor. I believe that the heir to the throne of Austria still has a grandchild who's alive, so I think he's number one in line.
Okay, well, maybe there's a possibility. Um, well, I don't know. Governments seem to go if Aristotle has taught us anything. Aristotle, yeah, Aristotle. Governments come in cycles. You get what is it?
Yeah.
Monarchies, aristocracies, democracies, and then the democracies collapse, and you wind up with a monarchy again. Or actually, democracies are the bad version of a by the people government, but you get the idea.
There's a tension between the three sources of power: the people, the aristocracy, and the royalty. And whichever one gets too much power, it gets corrupt because the fall of man corrupts people. The genius of the American founders was, and they really were geniuses, was they tried to set up a system where you could always change, you could swap out the part that was failing, and still get something. So if AI is not going to solve our world government problem, and I pray it doesn't because that sounds terrible, what about the beneficial side effect of a Martian invasion if the Martians prove to be wise and benevolent rulers? I, for one, am willing to welcome our new insect overlords because I think that they will only eat the fat people. Oh no, wait, hold on. I'm first on the list.
Well, I mean,
oh my gosh, time to start dieting.
they're all going to catch a cold and die. So
there we go. Because their advanced civilization is too stupid to take a vaccine, or they'll get the vaccine from the WHO, which will finally do some good. We expected. Here's the thing: there's life in subsea vents, volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean, who's part of an ecosystem that never has even any sunlight. They're called thermocytophiles.
Yeah.
There are microbes in the Antarctic, which there should be no life there. There are things growing at high altitudes and in deep caves. Okay, we were expecting life on other planets. The moon, maybe not, because it's barren it's sterilized. It's got a vacuum. But Mars, but Venus, now Venus, it turns out to be a molten oven filled with a boiling sulfuric acid atmosphere that's denser than the bottom of the Marianas Trench. And is a greenhouse gas, so it's the lava flows cover the surface, and Mars looks like it might maybe have had water at one time, but maybe not. There's some ambiguous evidence that they might have microbial life, maybe not. But there's not Digithoris. There's not Tars Tarkas.
No.
Venus is not covered with dinosaurs and luscious cave girls, which is what we expected.
Well, they've just pushed it out to other planets because all the local ones were not suitable.
Well,
or just other stars.
In my lifetime, we found dozens and dozens of exoplanets, some of which are within the Goldilocks ring of.
Well, we think
the liquid water range from their primary.
I mean, on some level, we're inferring their existence. I mean, that's all right. I'm willing to.
It's guess.
I'm willing to concede exoplanets probably exist, but I mean.
They're very far away.
Yes. Well, but I mean, actually, one of the things we have in our future, which have you noticed the rise recently of simulation theory?
Yes, but that has nothing to do with science. That has to do with the people's hunger for God.
Well, I was going to say that I was thinking about it this morning. Because I did an interview with someone years ago for the Sci-Fi show, and we were discussing simulation theory, and I said, so basically the intelligent design guys were right. And he chuckled and went, yeah, I guess so. Because simulation theory is essentially the admission that the ID guys with their mind is
The
behind the universe is
the
just
fine the
conceding.
fine the
It's
fine tuning argument, in other words.
well, yeah, but I mean, it's conceding that point entirely,
Yeah. Yeah.
but saying, but we don't have to listen. We don't have to listen to that mind because I still want to, cheat on my wife, and I won't. I won't say the other bit.
You're
But
assuming you're assuming that the simulation will not respawn you into either the hellscape or the heavenscape, depending on how many points you've gotten during your life and whether or not you take advantage of the escape clause. You
sure,
see,
but
once you say there's a simulation, once you say we're living in the Matrix, you have to really wonder what the Matrix masters want from you, because
sure.
they're bothering to spend computer time deceiving you locked in a holographic version of Plato's cave, right?
That
Do we need to explain to our listeners what the simulation theory is? Because you and I are just talking about it like everyone knows it.
the simulation theory is the universe as such doesn't exist. It's basically we're in a giant version of The Sims. To dumb it down a lot.
We're in the Matrix. We're in the Matrix.
Sort of. Well, it's probably more like The Sims than the Matrix as such. You don't have a body. You're just a character in a computer game. Effectively, would be a super simple way to put it.
In which case, the computer is your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
now it's not a theory, because it's scientifically can't be proven or disproven. It's like saying I have a theory that I'm asleep and this is a dream. Well, any test you prove it's a dream, if the dream looks exactly like real life, it doesn't. It's a metaphysical theory. It's not a theory of physics.
No, that's true. But I mean, like, it's an interesting thought experiment. Make of it what you will. But it's basically
Descartes' thought experiment.
It's basically the patch for the materialists and the atheists to avoid the unavoidable conclusion that the theists would write about everything.
Yes.
They don't want to concede that point, so they have a patch to say, well, all of the stuff we really can't dispute, and that is like empirically impossible for us to avoid, we'll just patch it. So yeah, that's just part of the simulation. It's fine. That solves the problem.
Drawing it back into what was predicted and what was not, I don't recall any science fiction story I read when I was young which had a thriving version of Christianity still in motion in the year 2000 or in the year 2025. I do recall, because of course, I do recall Robert Heinlein making fun of the Christians with his Fosterite religion in his, he wrote a story called Stranger in a Strangeland. He also wrote a story called The Number of the Beast, and I think he got those two titles switched, because I think that Mike Smith, the Martian, was basically the beast from Revelation. He was a false messiah, a false prophet. Because he was preaching you are God, which is the lie of the devil in Eden, and he was preaching orgies and wife swapping and sharing all property in common, and everything else the beast is always going to proselytize. But be that as it may, this is not about my beef with Heinlein, because I loved him as a child and he broke my heart when I found out he was lying to me about everything. But Isaac Asimov, also an atheist, his version of religion was the Great Galactic Spirit that appeared in one chapter of his Foundation trilogy, and it was just a fraud, a pious fraud. There were also any number of computerized religions where, like Vol or Landru or some other fake computer would pretend to be a god and was not. I'm very glad R2-D2 is specifically programmed not to imitate a deity. It says so in Star Wars. That's one of his Asimov directives. And then Luke Skywalker makes him break his programming. Terrible person, Luke! Terrible, you're a witch! So in any case, excuse me, I'm going off on the rails. I don't think people predicted the staying power of Christianity. Although I do recall that, like in the Lensman series, when they get married, it's church ceremony, but they don't mention the church by name. Science fiction writers tend to underestimate the role of religion in society? Did anyone ever? Dan Simmons in his Hyperion series has a Roman Catholic Church still in business. Now I believe it's the Evil Church of Evil. In Gather Darkness by Fritz Lieber, he also has the Catholic Church in business, and it is an Evil Church of Evil, and it's also run by computers, and it's also a pious fraud. Excuse me, run by holograms, not computers. They have robotics and they do tricks.
What about
Oh, the Dorsai series has Puritans, and for once, the Puritans are really scary because they're the bad guys in the Dorsai series by
what about
Gordon Dixon.
What about A Canticle for Leibowitz?
Ah, that is the big exception. That is the oasis in the desert.
Hmm.
Canonical Vlivovitz assumes that, like in the last Dark Ages, after the atomic war, it's the priests and the monks who will carefully write down and keep records of all the lost technology.
Hmm.
You see, and there's when I talked to Kreeft, Dr. Kreeft, the famous Catholic apologist, at a lecture once, I asked him what his favorite science fiction book was, and he said, "Oh, Canonical Leibowitz." He mentioned that one as his favorite.
It's a
You
good
see?
book. I don't,
Gene Wolfe puts a lot of religion in his books, but it's always disguised, and if you don't recognize it, you don't recognize it. So
I don't think the church will be going anywhere anytime soon. But I am.
neither do I.
But that being said, I
So in
had
other words, the world government didn't come into being, and the Christianity didn't disappear. Those are two predictions that the science fiction writers are batting zero.
well. The thing is, though, I am told this is something I've read, and I'm not going. So um, I could be mistaken, but apparently Islam is struggling today, essentially because of the internet. It's
Yeah,
killing it as people are getting access to knowledge and information. It's getting a lot harder to prop up um, a lot of that, a lot of what that religion claims and wants to argue. So
right. Right.
um, I,
Also,
I
the conversion rates are really high, extraordinarily high. They're not they're not giving up religion. They're just switching from Islam to Christianity. And
yeah,
by the way, there are
Islam doesn't
reports
Islam
you may
doesn't
believe them
hold
or
its adult converts. It's the fastest growing religion because they have the most babies. But
no. Catholicism is the fastest growing.
oh, good,
The
excellent.
Islam is close second. Close second.
Islam was in front for a while, but mostly because they had the most babies.
Well, Catholics are supposed to practice no contraception and no
Well,
abortion, so you should be
apparently,
having babies.
apparently, conservative, like traditional Catholics, have the highest. Traditional Catholics, unlike the Amish, have the highest birth rates. So
The number of liberal priests dropped from 50% in the 1960s to less than 1% these days.
I know. I heard that the other day. That was shocking. I mean, in a good way.
Not shocking if you believe the Darwinian theory that the whoever has the conservative Catholic gene will pass his traits on to his youth, whereas the liberal Catholic gene who uses contraception will
Well,
sterilize his youth.
I was
You
assuming.
know,
Yeah, my assumption was because I heard that the other day on the Shameless Potpourri podcast. They were sort of
same for me, same
running
guy.
through it, and my thought was, well, that kind of makes sense because the conservative Catholics are the ones with the spare sons to become priests.
Right,
So
right.
you're not getting grandkids. You're not getting grandkids from the kid that goes to seminary and
No,
becomes a
that's true.
priest.
That's true.
So if you have one, that's a problem. And if you
Now,
have
I should
if you
mention,
have eight, if a couple become priests, it
I,
doesn't really matter.
I don't mean to blow my own horn, but in the predictions I made for my story, Count to a Trillion, I predicted that the jihadists would interfere too much with an atomically armed India, and that the polygamists would eventually nuke them to pieces because they were less reluctant to use the nukes than the West was. And I predicted that a Spanish zealot who is nominally Catholic would take over the entire planet and force his religion down everyone's throats over everyone's objection and after terrific wars. But since he had learned the secret of immortality when he visited like another star or something, he was not going anywhere. So that my prediction was both for world government and the church would still be around, though it was a corrupted form of the church and a corrupted form of world government. But not to worry, it all came out in the end.
Well, the
Uh,
church seems to be
Robust.
making it. Well, I did. So I can't again. I can't confirm any of this. I picked it up from something I read on Facebook.
Mm.
So what a great source! But I think the source is reliable. They were saying there was a prophecy 100 years ago that the church would suffer 100 years of. In 1914, the church would suffer a
I
hundred
can
years of
confirm.
trial. That's right. I have that right.
I can confirm your source because I heard it from several people, including I went to a lecture on it.
Okay,
It
cool.
was a
So,
vision. It was a vision by the Holy Father, the Pope at the time,
yep.
and he heard that heaven was going to give the devil rulership over the church for 100 years, and that that the time would end, and if you calculate out when it was, it
That's
ended
like 24,
like
and like it was 2014 when it ended.
yeah, 2014 when it ended.
Um,
So the church is making a comeback, baby.
yeah, well, and things have been turning around since then. So,
Right, right.
um,
And a new golden age has started, which I didn't predict 5 years ago,
well,
much less 5 weeks ago.
and the church seems to be doing quite well. Who would have 20 years ago predicted the absolute implosion of the then um, rising atheism?
Yeah,
That was like back in the 90s. Richard Dawkins, the Four Horsemen,
yeah.
and we're all the rage, and we're busy making converts and seem to be ascendant. And who would have thought that would implode quite as spectacularly as it has?
Look,
And now we have them talking about pregnant men and all the rest of the nonsense. They had just no
like
defense against that at all.
I said, the science fiction writers of the 30s and 40s were heavily influenced by the intellectuals of their time, and all the intellectuals were enamored of Marxism. They were at
Mm,
least enamored of Fabianism, of this idea of endless upward progress, because that's what science fiction writers usually write about. They either write about progress or they write a warning story of something terrible that's going to happen.
mm,
In fact, the first honest to goodness science fiction story, I would argue, there's debate about what counts as the first, is Frankenstein. And Frankenstein is a warning issue that if you create something, if you create life, the creation might turn on you if you don't care for it properly. You see, it's kind of a dig against the suffragettes, if you actually want to think about it that way, considering what was in the atmosphere at the time when it was written by Mary Shelley, because it's reproduction, it's parthenogenic reproduction. It's reproduction by a man and a corpse with no woman involved, and of course with no mommy to raise him. The monster turns out to be a monster. See, but and to this day, Frankenstein's monster is the byword we use for anything we create and set in motion, AI or the internet or anything else where we end up screaming, "Back, back! I made you! Obey me!" And those are the last things you say before you die screaming. I mean, there's lots of things.
mm,
When we made the atomic bomb, we made a weapon that is absurdly dangerous. Okay. Now, I believe, because the Americans made it, that we used it properly in a proper military context. But even nowadays, there's a huge debate about that, and many people think that it violated the rules of the rules of the Thomistic rules of a just war to use it on Japan during wartime. You
mm.
know, and my entire youth was spent from when I was born until 1984, 1985. I lived in the shadow of an atomic war. Everyone thought there was going to be a nuclear exchange with the USSR.
I
The
remember that.
only person who thought that there might not be an exchange, a nuclear war, World War III, was not Paul Anderson, Pornell, who said we were just going to make a deal with the Soviets and set up an empire called the Co-Dominion, where they would run their hemisphere brutally, and we would run our hemisphere, slightly less brutally, and then we'd go to the stars, and it would later evolve into the Empire of Man or something, something. That's now all alternate history. That's no longer a possible future. You see, so that's one thing that we should be happy the science fiction writers got wrong.
Mm.
There might still be a World War III. In fact, it looked like it was about to start 5 or 6 weeks ago, but but it's not the Soviet Union. If it is, now we might get into a war with China, sure,
That'd be
over
just
Taiwan or something.
that'd be just as bad.
It would be just as bad. And the one thing science fiction writers never anticipated until recently. I mean, science fiction writers in the 80s and 90s would predicted the rise of terrorism and even nuclear terrorism,
Mm,
as did Tom Clancy, as did mainstream writers as well.
of course.
But but so far none of them have set off a nuke. You know,
No,
so far we have evaded a lot of things. Science fiction writers all predict dreams and nightmares.
but we
We
have.
haven't achieved many of our dreams, but I don't think we've hit many of the nightmares either. The closest we came to 1984 was for a few months during the COVID lockdowns.
I think We've probably avoided the nightmares simply due to the providence of God, though.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
of
been close
course,
run on many occasions.
far too close.
And I mean, nuclear weapons are spectacular, but they're not really that effective, or even. I mean, they're They make a big bang. I get that.
depending on what you want to do with them.
True, but I mean, like nuclear weapons as a battlefield, nuclear weapons as a battlefield weapon are basically useless. They're too large. Um,
Sure, but that's what a tactical nuclear weapon is for. If you want to wipe out an armored column of tanks rolling into Germany through one of the passes between
oh,
that and the
true,
Soviet Union,
but
that it's useful for.
to
If you want to
some
use it if
to
you want to
some
use it on a
degree.
bunch of Marines who are wearing jetpacks, who are scattering and then combining together at high speed, or using robotic assisted aiming systems from orbit, so you can throw a smart missile down someone's chimney into his underground bunker, that attack nuke is no use at all.
Yeah, like it's not. They're not actually that use. I mean, they're just not that useful. And certainly, strategic nuclear weapons are not particularly useful at all. They'll blow
No,
an entire city up, which is not that.
right.
I mean, it's useful for a deterrent effect, but actually, as a battlefield
Most of the
weapon,
wars, that took place in this generation were house to house fighting.
hmm,
Were Marines combing through houses where there were civilians mingled among terrorists.
we haven't seen a war like World War One or Two in our
No,
lifetime. Well, I mean, there's still some veterans
there was some
from
action
World
in
War Two
Panama.
around.
There was no. The Desert Storm was battlefield soldiers against battlefield soldiers. They just rolled up really quickly. There
True,
was an action in Panama.
but they
There
were.
was
Well, yeah, okay, but nothing on the
no
scale
nothing on the scale. No,
of
nothing on
World
the
War,
scale.
and nothing drawn out like that. I mean, the drawn out conflicts have been fighting. Was Afghanistan? Was Vietnam? Was I guess
They were
Korea was
all
a
they were
more
all asymmetrical warfare.
yeah.
They were all snipe and hide
Well,
warfare.
Korea wasn't, but I mean, but Vietnam was. Afghanistan and Iraq and that. Well,
Right,
yeah, much more that.
right.
So
So I think the science fiction writers did not get correct the future of warfare, even though
mm,
a lot of smart people think about the future of warfare.
we'll see where it goes, I
Uh,
suppose.
but I'm still waiting for the giant. I want our tanks to stand up on two legs and look like men in armor that are 40 feet tall, because that's what I'm expecting. Now
You want a BattleTech
my
future?
my middle tech. Well, I want the future of eternal war. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I do not want the one future I don't want is Warhammer 40K. The
Nobody
one
wants that
future
future.
nobody wants because it's the future of eternal war. No, my friend, the military historian Captain Wynn, great name for a military captain, isn't it? Said, "Why in the world all you need is a platform with a gun with armor around it, and they work a lot better on treads than they do standing up on your hind legs, because then Luke Skywalker can't trip one."
Yeah.
And I said, "Look, I'm sorry. If you have a metal elephant, a robotic metal elephant with a gun in its head, it can walk over snow. It can walk over. Treads would have been no good in the Battle of Hoth in the second Star Wars movie. It can walk over. It can walk over. It can walk through a swamp. It can, give me a hover tank any day."
Reaper
You
drones
see?
would have been fine though.
Yeah, drones would have
Uh,
been fine.
well, I mean, I guess we'll see. Well,
But the Chinese have make their drones so that they can be used as fireworks. So you actually form dragons and other geometrical shapes in the sky and can make pictures. So I want to terrify the enemy, the military drones, to form like a raging eagle with arrows in its claws in order to before it strikes, before it drops its loads of lethal weapons.
what do you
That would be
remember?
something to see.
You talk about the future of warfare. Do you remember? Did you see the Bruce Willis science fiction film Surrogates?
No, no, that's what I missed.
There's a brief scene in that. So in Surrogates, everybody has. They're basically made human, convincing human robots that you can control from a chair in your home, and now nobody
Right.
leaves their house. Um, and it's not a bad movie. I actually quite enjoyed it, but it has all sorts of weird. They had weird, unexpected effects, like all of the anti-discrimination law about who you could hire went away because things like, oh, it doesn't matter if the guy that's good at selling women's clothing is a 300-pound fat dude. He's in a robot
Yeah,
body selling them of a, like a 22 year
right.
old
You just
skinny
you just
skinny white girl.
you just swap bodies. Right,
Yeah,
right.
but there was a brief bit in it where I think it was just an interview with a battlefield correspondent or something. But the future of warfare was they would land like an
They
Osprey
just have
type vehicle or
they
something,
just have the
full
robots
of yeah,
fight.
full of robots, and all of the soldiers were just miles behind the line, controlling the soldiers remotely. And when one gets killed, you'd respawn and
I
off you
read
go
that
again.
in a Roger Zelazny short story back in the '60s. It was called television.
There you go.
Was his term for it. Yeah,
Well,
so
that's
you
fine, but I
just
mean,
have my robots fight your robots, and you and I
well,
just
no,
sip tea.
they were hunting rebels in the jungle.
Hmm.
But the soldiers that were going out weren't in any. I mean, the rebels were going to
Hey,
get killed, but the soldiers on
the
the other side were
future
not.
the future did happen during Operation Desert Storm when a group there was a platoon that surrendered to a drone. The drone flew over
That's the
and
second one,
pointed its
wasn't it?
guns at him. The second one, I think, yeah, I think so.
No, I
And they
remember
all just
that.
held up their hand. They threw down their weapons and held up their hands because they didn't want to fight for their tyrant.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we seem to be getting smaller, more dangerous drones every day too. I mean, drone
you
warfare
should
is in
you should
Ukraine at
read
the moment.
you should read my short story Peter Power Armor because I predict that it's all going to be drones sniping at civilians and civilians having to take extraordinary measures to be protected against invisible, unseen terrorist enemies.
That's a disturbing
Yeah.
thought. So
Well,
we're coming up to the hour. What other futures were we
well,
denied as we wrap up?
let me do the opposite. Let me say what the futures that we missed that I'm glad we missed. We mentioned the atomic war. That has not happened
Mm,
yet. It still might. Uh, Interplanetary travel has not happened yet, but thanks to Elon Musk, it still might. It was put on hold for at least 20 or 30 years. If we had continued on, if we had kept up the same rate, the same pace that went from the Wright brothers to the moonshot, that was within one man's lifetime. We could have gone from the moonshot to the Mars shot by now, and we haven't.
well,
The Mars shot is back in prospect, but for at least 20 or 30 years, there was no Mars shot in even being contemplated.
I mean, the biggest problem we had with the space travel future was it's really hard to get out of Earth's gravity well. Though
Yeah,
interestingly, I used to
yeah.
watch there's a YouTuber. He basically does mega structures and this sort of stuff.
Yes, I know.
You can build a thing called a Lofstrom loop,
Right.
and you can get well. Basically, it's a
It's a
big
space
sort of
elevator.
effectively, but you can go up it and come back down it, and you can get out of the atmosphere on it, and so you just
Right.
tow something up it and then launch off it really easily. Um, we could apparently technologically we could build that now. It would probably cost a couple of $100 billion. There's no
Yep.
political will to do it, and where you'd site the thing would be a problem. Like there's a bunch of political problems that would make it hard to
Yep.
do, but technologically we could do it.
The idea of a space elevator, the problem with that one, just a beanstalk, which I've used in my stories,
That's
but
a material. That's a materials
that requires
problem.
the strength of structures. That's a material problem. That's not a lightweight energy problem.
But
Uh,
A Lofstrom loop doesn't have that problem. We could build that
yeah,
now. That's a political will issue, really, and
yep.
also it's massive. Where the hell would you put the thing?
Also,
Um,
putting put a laser on the ground and then shoot up into a an upside down cup that has your fuel supply in it.
yep.
You can leave all the heavy parts in the ground and just uh,
Well,
get into near Earth orbit by a laser blast. Easy
well.
peasy.
SpaceX didn't quite do that, but they're
They caught the
you,
rocket to
they caught the
reuse it.
rocket. They caught the
Yeah.
rocket, which means you don't need all the landing gear, which is just weight you
Right.
have to drag around.
Now here's another thing. We're going to reach a fluxion point where once we have enough gear in space to do the major work up there, all we'll need is a taxi service from the Earth.
Hmm.
So you go up in a high flying plane, and then you launch a space plane from the back of your cargo jet.
Hmm.
The what did Virgin Galactic? What was it called? A Spaceship One.
Something like that. I don't
Yeah,
remember. I don't remember, but
so
yeah,
if all you got to do is ferry personnel up there, but you also have if your robots have mined the asteroids for an infinite amount of material that you need, and you have a space station the size of something like 2001: Space Odyssey, you know. Now,
a lot of things get a lot simpler once you get a bit of scale going.
Robert Heinlein, who I just made fun of, I have to compliment now because he said, and I quote, "Once you're in orbit, you're halfway to anywhere. The amount of energy it
Yeah.
takes to get to Pluto and from orbit, and the amount of energy it takes to get from Earth's surface to orbit is about the same.
There you go.
Okay, so once we have an orbital presence, which is probably going to happen in my lifetime if I live long enough, then the colonization of the solar system is available to us. The problem is the real estate sucks. You're better off building a city at the bottom of the sea than building a city on the moon or on Mars, because at least at the bottom of the sea, all you have to do is open the stopcock, bring in seawater, and then boil it for oxygen. I mean, electronically separate it for oxygen.
Yeah.
Then you could go fishing by opening a porthole. But on Mars, you have to ship everything there.
You have to take everything
you know?
with you.
Now, you could take there are people who think it's technologically not unfeasible to build something on Mars. To those people, I say, phooey. Take an airplane that flies at 30,000 feet. It's a pressurized vehicle. The oxygen works perfectly fine. You put that on Mars. It's got a thinner atmosphere, but you're pressurized.
The
You see what I'm saying?
The main issue would be, like any of these things, it's going to be an issue of scale. You need to be able to feed everybody.
Yes.
You need enough space and stuff to feed
Right.
and it's like you need to solve all the how to feed everybody and recycle
Well,
everything and keep everyone alive.
If the guy from The Martian could do it just with potatoes, I think American ingenuity can do it.
Oh,
By the way, that book was that movie also was really technically accurate. That guy did his homework like nobody's business. So there's a prediction that I think we might be able to see in our lifetime come true.
Well, I think.
But let's pause a moment. Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say most of these sorts of things are not problems of technology. We can actually those are all either solved or
soluble.
Solved or yeah, like I mean, they seem like you'd be able to solve them if you just sat down and worked on them for a bit. You don't seem to like you don't need some breakthrough you have no idea how to achieve. It's the problems are all tractable.
We are in the same position as someone in the year 1900 thinking about heavier than aircraft. There were already designs on the drawing boards. The Wright brothers hadn't flown yet, but there were people who were trying, and it was feasible, and it was close enough you could smell it. It just hadn't happened yet. Okay. Now, fast and light drive, for that I think you're going to have to resurrect the ghost of Einstein and kill him. That's gonna take some doing. But I think we should close by mentioning one or two or maybe three futures that we predicted that did not happen. Sure. Okay. First, the overpopulation future of Soylent Green, where we're eating each other because everything is too crowded. Okay.
In fact, we're about to have a major problem because of idiots pushing that.
Because of underpopulation. Correct. We actually suffered from a population bust, not a population.
It's about to be catastrophic. We are potentially circling an absolute catastrophe because of the idiots pushing Malthusianism.
Right. Second, the world filled with pollution from top to bottom. That was also predicted by many people, and it was basically solved in the 1970s by putting filters on large industrial smokestacks. I mean, basically our air and water is cleaner than it was when there was no one here except for American Indians. Okay, and no one seems to realize that, and the eco nuts seem to just move the goalpost further and further away from sanity. So the overburdened, overpolluted planet that was predicted in basically everything I read when I was a kid. Even Star Trek, optimistic Star Trek, predicted a genetic war on the Indian subcontinent with Khan Noonien and Singh, and maybe World War III, maybe an atomic war as well. And my favorite prediction that didn't come true, however, is from the TV show Space 1999, which is the only place to put your nuclear waste dump is on the moon, but then it will superheat and blow the moon out of orbit, and blow it out of orbit at such a high speed that it will be able to visit a different star system every week. I'm not sure how that works physics-wise. Hey, it was still a great show. It was still a good show.
Fun. That's all that matters.
So the show was fun. It's all that matters. So that did not happen. The robot revolt has not yet happened. I'm also happy for that one. And the invasion from Mars has not happened. So I think in terms of the daydreams of science fiction not coming true, we should be thankful that the nightmares of the atomic war, the pollution world, the disasters have not happened yet.
Well, DeepSeek R1 out of China, the new large language model to take the world by storm, was asked to improve itself, and it did. So,
Well, this will be the last broadcast ever by any human being who, because you and I are going to be replaced by robot computers cartoons next week. No, look, hey, I'm a science fiction writer. We warn people about things that might go wrong with your technology. Read Frankenstein. Read 1984. But don't read it like it's an instruction manual, okay? Take heed and take warning. Do not invent anything you cannot control. You're like the wizards in the Middle Ages were instructed by their demonic masters not to don't call up anything from the pit you can't put down again. Okay, same thing is true of your scientists. Tesla, all you other mad scientists, don't make anything you don't have an off switch, don't have a kill switch for.
that's true. Well, on that note, thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope that was entertaining, and we'll talk to you next time.